In my past life, it felt like Ethan Ashworth and I were always missing each other, caught in a cycle of regret. After a bumpy road, we finally got married. But on our wedding night, he announced he was leaving for an overseas development project. He left me, disappearing for 10 years without a word. 10 years later, he returned with the woman he'd loved since his youth. "Sophia Sterling," he said, "we never got the license, never spent the wedding night together. Our marriage was never legally binding. I'm getting married now. It's inappropriate for you to stay in my family's house any longer." It was only then I understood. What I'd seen as unfortunate missed connections was all his deliberate design. He reunited with his family, basking in success, moving into a new home and welcoming a new wife. And what about me? It said the city is full of flowers in bloom, but it seemed my own spring never arrived. Reborn, I beat him to it. On our wedding day, I left without a word. But at the wedding, without a bride, he completely fell apart. "One Ethan, your little fiancé, is here checking up on you again. She sticks so close, afraid her prize catch will fly away? Yeah, might as well tie him to her belt. Don't talk nonsense, look, the poor girl is blushing." My head snapped up, eyes finding the owner of the soft, feminine voice. It was Vivian Vaughn. Dark hair, fair skin, a slender figure. Her smile was sweet and pure, the recognized goddess of the architecture department. She was also the woman Ethan Ashworth had chased after his whole life in my previous existence. In that instant, it hit me. I was reborn. Reborn to the time before the wedding, when Ethan had taken leave to come back and arrange the ceremony. And Vivian Vaughn was the sweetheart he brought back in that past life. Now, she was smiling faintly at me. "Looking for Ethan. He'll be right down." As I stood lost in thought under the sun, Ethan Ashworth approached, his face cold. "What are you doing here again?" He pushed through the crowd to stand before me, grabbing my arm and pulling me onto a side path. "I'm meeting with classmates. Do you have to follow me even now?" He adjusted his glasses, looking at me with displeasure. "Sophia Sterling, the wedding is in 5 days. Can you just give me these last 5 days of freedom?" The dense leaves overhead cast large patches of green shade. Sunlight filtered through the gaps, dappling his face like scattered gold. But the eyes looking at me held only an icy chill. I gazed at the man before me, the man I had loved for 18 years in my past life. Now he was in his prime, sharp and handsome, but who could have guessed what a cruel, cold heart lay beneath that exterior? I withdrew my gaze, lowered my eyes, and smiled. "Sorry, Ethan Ashworth. I won't bother you anymore." With that, I turned to leave, but Ethan grabbed my arm again. "What tantrum are you throwing now? I've already agreed to marry you. What else are you unsatisfied with?" I spun around abruptly, shaking his hand off. Ethan looked startled, but the disdain in his eyes quickly deepened. "Sophia Sterling, if you keep making trouble, we might as well just cancel the wedding." I took a deep breath, swallowing down the churning feelings of resentment, grievance, pain, and bitterness. What he did to me in the last life, I would return in kind. So, when I spoke again, my voice was softer. Looking at him, my eyes held a hint of grievance. "I wasn't making trouble. There were just some wedding details I needed your opinion on, that's why I came." Ethan waved a hand, cutting me off before I could finish. "I don't have any opinions. I told you before, just do whatever you like." "All right then, I won't ask you about the rest of the arrangements." Perhaps because I appeared so obedient and agreeable, or perhaps because, deep down, he felt a sliver of guilt. Ethan suddenly reached out and ruffled my hair. "Okay, I'll come home early tonight for dinner with you." I put on a happy expression. "Okay, I'll wait for you." Ethan couldn't help but smile, but only for an instant, then his brow furrowed, the smile vanishing. I pretended not to notice and left cheerfully. Only when I had walked a long, long way did I slowly crouch down in the shade of a tree, letting the tears flow freely. Ethan came back for dinner, but not alone. He brought Vivian Vaughn with him. In the last life, he had always hidden his feelings. I had no idea he liked Vivian. This life, even before marrying me, he couldn't control his impulses. Vivian greeted everyone in the Ashworth family with smiles and cheerful words. She presented each of them with beautifully wrapped gifts. Vivian was beautiful, elegant, and poised, standing next to the tall, refined, and handsome Ethan Ashworth. They looked perfect together, and I seemed like the out-of-place outsider. "Sophia, this is for you. Wishing you and Ethan a happy marriage." Vivian walked up to me, handing me the gift. I accepted it graciously and thanked her. She seemed a bit surprised by my reaction, pressing her lips together as the smile in her eyes slowly faded. "Sophia, hurry and get dinner ready, Mrs. Ashworth instructed me naturally, just like countless times before. I put the gift down and held up my finger, wrapped in a band-aid. "I accidentally cut my hand this morning," I said calmly. "I can't cook tonight." Daniel Ashworth rolled his eyes. "You're so delicate. A little cut and you can't cook," Chloe Ashworth chimed in. "I think you're just trying to be lazy." Mrs. Ashworth glanced at me and smiled. "Sophia's about to be a bride. Of course, brides are delicate. Looks like this old woman will have to do it." Vivian quickly followed her to the kitchen. "Mrs. Ashworth, since Sophia hurt her hand, let me help you." "How could we let you? You're a guest." "It's no trouble, Mrs. Ashworth. I'll just help out." Soon, Vivian came out carrying a dish. "Sophia, could you take this? I need to go help Mrs. Ashworth peel onions." She asked for my help very naturally. I stood up, about to take the plate. But before my hand could touch it, the plate tipped over. Scalding hot fish pieces spilled all over Vivian, especially on her bare calf, which instantly turned red. She cried out, crouching down and clutching her leg, tears welling in her eyes. "Sophia Sterling, you did that on purpose, didn't you?" Ethan, furious, shoved me aside. I stumbled back several steps and fell to the ground. My palm landed right on a sticky piece of fish, sharp bones piercing the skin. My forehead hit the edge of the table hard. Ethan carefully helped Vivian up. Only then did he turn his cold gaze on me. "Apologize to Vivian. Now, I Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Renge, Judong, enduring the sharp pain, shakily got to my feet. Blood dripped from my palm onto my skirt, a shocking splash of red. Ethan seemed momentarily stunned. Then, his gaze towards me filled with coldness again. "Sophia, apologize." "Ethan, it's all right. Sophia didn't mean to not take the plate." Vivian quickly tugged at his sleeve, trying to dissuade him softly. "Sophia Sterling, didn't you hear me? I said apologize to Vivian. What if I refuse? Then I will cancel the wedding immediately." Ethan stood up, looking down at me. "Sophia Sterling, you know my temper. I never go back on my word." Vivian stood behind him. When I looked at her, she gave a subtle, triumphant smirk. I knew she was provoking me. She didn't want me to apologize. She wanted the wedding canceled. She wanted to marry Ethan Ashworth. In her past life, she hadn't wanted to marry someone she didn't love, took many detours, and only achieved her wish with her second marriage. But I wouldn't let her succeed this time. "Fine, I apologize." I bit my lip, tears welling in my eyes. My expression showed both grievance and fear. The moment I apologized, Ethan visibly relaxed, letting out a small sigh of relief. Though he quickly put his cold mask back on. "Don't let it happen again." He took the first aid kit Daniel brought over. He gave me a cool glance. "The wedding is just a few days away. Behave yourself." I lowered my head, crying silently, putting on an act of being timid and frightened. Ethan carefully treated Vivian's wound, then said gently, "I should take you to the hospital just to make sure it doesn't scar." "Will that be inconvenient? Sophia might be upset." "She won't be. This was her fault in the first place." Ethan finished, then shot me another extremely cold look. "She causes trouble, and I have to clean up her mess. What right does she have to be upset?" Ethan didn't come back that night. An unknown number sent me several texts. "He's worried about my injury, afraid I'm in pain. He's staying with me tonight. You should sleep early, don't wait up in vain, bride-to-be." She was right, I did need to sleep early. There were many things waiting for me to handle, like the old houses and shops my parents left behind, and the inheritance they left for me. The properties needed to be handed over to a reliable realtor for sale. And all the inheritance, once sorted and liquidated, I would take every cent with me. I wouldn't leave a dime for the Ashworths. 7 the day before the wedding. Time for the final fitting of the wedding dress and gown, the last adjustments. In my past life, Ethan had just briefly tried on the groom's suit and left. This time, surprisingly, he didn't leave. He was still sitting on the sofa outside when I finished trying on the main wedding gown. And when I came out, there was a clear flash of amazement in his eyes. The waist seems a bit loose. Maybe tighten it a little for a better effect, the stylist suggested softly. Ethan agreed. True, Sophia's waist is tiny, it should be taken in. But I shook my head. No need, it's more comfortable this way. Since I wouldn't be wearing it anyway, it didn't matter if it was big or small. When you first came to our house as a child, you cried every day and every night. He stood up, walked over, and wrapped his arms around my waist from behind. In the blink of an eye, you've grown into a beautiful young woman. Sophia, we're getting married. He lowered his head, desire welling in his eyes, wanting to kiss me. But I raised a hand to stop him. There are people here, I feigned shyness. Ethan chuckled, clearly pleased. Then we'll wait for the wedding night, he whispered in my ear. I lowered my head, a silent, mocking smile playing on my lips. The bride and groom weren't supposed to meet the night before the wedding. Having no family home of my own nearby, I stayed at a hotel. When Ethan dropped me off downstairs, his phone happened to ring. It was probably Vivian calling. He seemed distracted. I deliberately put on a jealous and hurt expression. Ethan raised an eyebrow. All right, the wedding is tomorrow. Don't give me that look over trivial matters. Then come pick me up early tomorrow. I looked up at him, my eyes full of nervousness and anticipation. Ethan clearly enjoyed this. I'll be there at the scheduled time, don't worry. He then hurried away. I immediately turned and went upstairs. I double-checked my bank cards and passbooks one last time and made a few calls to the realtor. Only then did I shower and go to bed. I slept soundly, dreamlessly. Ethan, however, had trouble sleeping. He dozed off briefly as dawn approached. But strangely, he dreamt of Sophia Sterling. In the dream, it was her trying on the wedding dress yesterday. Every smile, every movement was beautiful. Without him noticing, Sophia had quietly blossomed into a lovely young woman. Her waist was very slim, her skin very fair. Though not as tall as Vivian, she had a petite, charming delicacy. Unlike Vivian's thinness, she still possessed a youthful freshness and fullness. The images in the dream were somewhat inappropriate. This seemed to be the first time he felt a preposterous desire for the Sophia Sterling he usually dismissed. Woken by a phone call, Ethan felt an inexplicable irritation. He even wondered if he should postpone his departure by a day. Should he wait until after the wedding night before leaving? At least, she had loved him for so many years. It could be considered a meager return for her devotion. But the voice on the phone jolted him awake instantly. What did you say? The bride is missing? He shot up, his fingers gripping the phone, trembling slightly. That's impossible. Did you go to the wrong room? No, Mr. Ashworth, we're in the right room. The front desk said the room was checked out of 2 hours ago. We can't reach Miss Sterling's phone either. The makeup artist sounded frantic, on the verge of tears. Ethan felt a deafening roar in his ears, like clashing armies. After a moment, he found his voice. I'll call her. Please wait a moment. But Sophia's phone was unreachable. Ethan frantically scrolled through his contacts, unsure who to call. He didn't have contact information for any of Sophia's friends or relatives. He knew nothing about her. All these years, she had chased after him with unwavering devotion. He had long been certain he had her firmly in his grasp. So even now, he couldn't believe Sophia would dare to leave him. Ethan threw on some clothes haphazardly and drove to the hotel himself. He was so distraught on the way that he ran 2 red lights. As he neared the hotel, he tried calling Sophia again, still unreachable. His heart sank uncontrollably. Then, the makeup artist called again. Mr. Ashworth, we found the bride. It was just a misunderstanding. Ethan felt his heart settle back into place instantly. The heavy fog pressing on his mind seemed to be swept away by a giant hand. The car screeched to a halt by the roadside. His voice trembled slightly. Say that again. Mr. Ashworth, we found the bride. She said she didn't sleep well last night and changed rooms temporarily. Ethan didn't register whatever else the makeup artist said. He leaned back against the car seat and suddenly laughed. He really was going crazy. Sophia loved him so much, loved him to the bone. How could she possibly run away from the wedding? Even crazier, he had almost believed it just now. How ridiculous, how absurd. 9 before the wedding, the Ashworth family had consulted someone about the couple's compatibility based on birth charts. Due to certain taboos, the groom couldn't personally pick up the bride. When the bridal procession returned to the wedding venue with the bride, Ethan was already downstairs, dressed in an expensive, well-ironed black suit, holding a bouquet of fresh flowers. However, when the groomsmen got out of the car, their expressions were varied, and the planned bridesmaids were nowhere to be seen. The bride sat in the car, her face veiled by white tulle. Only a hazy, beautiful profile was visible. Ethan hadn't expected to be very emotional. After all, marrying Sophia Sterling always carried a degree of reluctance. But for some reason, the moment he saw the bride in the car, his heart inexplicably fluttered. Beneath that indefinable emotion, there seemed to be a surge of hidden joy. He remembered Sophia's captivating beauty when she tried on the dress the day before, remembered her eyes, gazing at him with tenderness and affection. A soft warmth seemed to bloom silently in his heart. Besides career success, a woman's years of unwavering adoration could also make a man immensely proud and satisfied. Holding the bouquet, he slowly walked towards the car. The groomsmen, all his old classmates and friends, looked at him, seeming to want to say something but ultimately remaining silent. The car door opened. Ethan extended his hand. Sophia! He didn't realize that when he spoke her name, a faint smile had already touched his eyes. Fingers clad in white lace, soft and slender, gently rested in his palm. Ethan immediately grasped them, but in that instant, a strange feeling arose within him. This didn't feel like Sophia's hand. Her fingers were softer, her hand softer too, a perfect fit in his palm. Just then, the bride turned and stepped out of the car. Through the white veil, she looked shyly towards Ethan. However, the moment their eyes met, Ethan abruptly flung the hand he was holding away. Color seemed to drain instantly from his face. A dead silence fell over the surroundings. Vivian Vaughn looked first startled, then incredulous. Finally, humiliated and aggrieved, her eyes reddened. 10, the bouquet dropped from Ethan's hand. He spun around, grabbed a random person, and demanded hoarsely, "What happened? Where's Sophia? Didn't you go to the hotel to pick her up? You picked up the wrong person and didn't even notice. What are you good for?" His emotions suddenly spiraled out of control, his voice jumping an octave. "We don't know either. When we went to pick up the bride, only Vivian was in the room. Yeah, we didn't see Sophia Sterling at all." Ethan turned, his gaze fixed deadly on the makeup artist. "Didn't you say you found the bride? Is this what you call found? Mr. Ashworth, this has nothing to do with me." The makeup artist was about to cry. She was just an employee, what could she do? If that Miss Vaughn hadn't said she'd take full responsibility, she would never have dared to tell such a lie. She just wanted to earn her fee. "Ethan, it's not her fault. It was my arrangement." Vivian got out of the car, standing tall with her back straight. Her eyes were very red, but her expression was calm and composed. Sophia disappeared, and the wedding was about to start. "I didn't want you to be embarrassed or put in a difficult position, so I came up with this idea. If you want to blame someone, blame me. If you want to yell, yell at me. It has nothing to do with anyone else." As she spoke, she lowered her head slightly, and when the tears she was holding back fell, Vivian gave a sad smile. "It's because I like you too much that I did something so foolish. Ethan, why don't we just go along with it? Haven't you always had feelings for Vivian too? Besides, Vivian shares your interests. Isn't she much better than that little ward you were supposed to marry? On a big day like the wedding, she throws a tantrum and just leaves. Does she expect you to beg her back with a grand gesture? Who knows what kind of scene she'll cause in the future? The auspicious hour is almost here, Ethan. Make a decision quickly." People chimed in from all directions. Vivian gradually stopped sobbing, looking at Ethan with faint hope in her eyes. Ethan stood motionless for a long time. Finally, he slowly turned to face the crowd. Vivian looked beautiful in the white wedding dress. He couldn't deny that he and Vivian shared common interests. Spending time together, he had developed feelings for her. But he had also always been clear that the person he was meant to marry was Sophia Sterling. He had already considered her his wife in his mind. Even though he had subconsciously begun to feel that Sophia was no longer good enough for him. But he hadn't thought of breaking the engagement. Instead, he allowed her the privilege of marrying up to him. Yet, Ethan never imagined. He hadn't steeled himself to dump Sophia. He was fulfilling the promise to hold the wedding ceremony with her. Even though he hid the fact that he was going overseas for the development project, he had even decided to postpone his departure for a few days, to give her a complete wedding and wedding night. If luck was on their side, she would have a child. Then she could establish her footing in the Ashworth family. He would have then repaid the debt of gratitude to her family and fulfilled her years of affection. But now, Sophia had pulled a vanishing act right before the wedding. 11 Ethan couldn't understand. Where did she get the nerve to pull this stunt with him? Just because he had gotten a bit closer to Vivian Vaughn? Just because he had defended the scalded Vivian and blamed her at the Ashworth house that day? But what right did Sophia Sterling have to make such a scene? Wasn't she afraid the wedding would be completely canceled? Or did she think she could use her parents' sacrifice as leverage to do whatever she pleased, to play him like a fiddle? Ethan had never been so enraged and out of composure in his life. He even thought, why not just do as his friends suggested, go along with the mistake? Just marry Vivian Vaughn. But somehow, looking at the beautiful and elegant Vivian before him, she was wearing the main wedding gown Sophia had chosen. She was taller than Sophia, but also thinner. Thus, the waist was looser and the bodice looked empty. He couldn't help but remember Sophia trying on the dress yesterday, standing before him petite and graceful, yet with full curves. He had been truly stunned then. Sophia usually dressed very plainly, mostly loose, casual clothes, so he hadn't known that when dressed up, she could be so beautiful. Ethan! Seeing him stand there motionless, Vivian couldn't help but call out softly. But Ethan suddenly raised his hand, ripped off the groom's boutonniere, and tossed it onto the ground. Sophia suddenly felt unwell. Let's postpone the wedding. After saying this, without looking at the crowd, without another glance at Vivian, he simply turned and walked away. Vivian stood there, stunned. Gradually, her face flushed crimson. All eyes were on her face, her body. Some showed sympathy, some indignation on her behalf, but most seemed to be waiting to watch her humiliation unfold. Vivian trembled all over, her fingertips icy and shaking uncontrollably. She had never experienced such shame in her life. Despite her average background, she had worked hard to get into a university in the capital. As the campus belle of the architecture department, she had always been adored by male students. Ethan had always been attentive around her. Yet this very man, whom she had treated almost like an admirer, had publicly humiliated her like this. Why? Vivian ripped off her veil. As tears streamed down, she threw the veil violently onto the ground. 12, only when I was seated on the plane leaving the city did I finally let out a full breath of relief. The plane climbed high into the clouds. I leaned back in my seat and gently closed my eyes. The nightmare of my past life, at this moment, had reached a temporary end. I didn't know what the road ahead would look like, but one thing was clear. Away from this ungrateful family, my future could only get brighter. When I was 5, my parents died in an earthquake. At the most critical moment, they pushed Ethan Ashworth out with all their might, saving his life. So, the Ashworth family naturally adopted me as a way of repaying the debt. They even arranged my engagement to Ethan, ensuring I would have lifelong support. But as I grew up, this gratitude soured. As Ethan's future looked increasingly bright, I, the orphan, became the lucky girl marrying up into the Ashworth family. Later, Ethan went overseas for the development project, and all contact ceased. I sold the house. My parents left me to pay for Mrs. Ashworth's medical treatments. She was paralyzed for 5 years, and I took care of her meticulously for 5 years. Later still, Ethan's brother and sister got married, had children. With a single phrase about the eldest sister-in-law's duties being like a mother's, I willingly handed over my parents' inheritance. When Chloe Ashworth got married, I provided the $36,000 dowry that gave her confidence. When she had her daughter, I gave her a $6,000 gift to bolster her status. When she suffered domestic abuse, I helped her seek justice, handled the divorce proceedings, and personally brought her and her child back home. But in the end, when Ethan wanted to kick me out, she was the one who said dismissively, "Raising you for over a decade, our family paid back your family's kindness long ago." To repay the debt, we even sacrificed my brother's lifelong happiness. If you have any conscience, hurry up and make way for my sister-in-law. Later, when Ethan brought Vivian Vaughn back, it was also his mother and sister who agreed to their marriage, happily accepting Vivian, and tacitly approved Ethan's decision to drive me away. Actually, Ethan had been sending money back over the 10 years. Actually, he and Vivian had long been living together overseas, having children. Everyone in the Ashworth family knew. Only I was kept in the dark, exploited until my last bit of usefulness was gone, only to die miserably from a severe illness in the end. Thinking about all this, I found it utterly laughable. If my parents knew in the afterlife, would they regret sacrificing themselves to save Ethan Ashworth? I would never know the answer. And I, having lived 2 lives, no longer insisted that good deeds would be rewarded. 13 Ethan made countless calls, but none went through. And Sophia Sterling had blocked and deleted the numbers of everyone in the Ashworth family. Mrs. Ashworth initially didn't take it seriously. "Ethan, don't you dare go looking for her. What new bride dares to make such a scene, put on such airs? She's just playing hard to get, trying to make you give in. We won't." In her view, Sophia Sterling, an orphan with no support, who was head over heels in love with her pride and joy son, couldn't possibly run far. This whole drama was just her blowing off steam. How could she possibly give up such an advantageous marriage? Ethan stood by the window, motionless for a long time. He had a persistent, ominous feeling. Sophia wasn't just throwing a tantrum. She wasn't playing games. She was truly angry, truly. Didn't want to marry him anymore. The rejected kiss during the dress fitting yesterday. Her overly compliant urging for him to leave when he dropped her at the hotel last night. She was no longer like before, where the slightest disturbance would send her running to him in tears, insecure. She used to be paranoid about every woman around him. She cared about him, cared to the point that it gradually annoyed him. That's why he had applied for the overseas project without telling her. He had repaid the debt, he owed her nothing. He could leave with a clear conscience, pursue the different life he desired. But he never expected that the one to walk away first on the wedding day would be Sophia Sterling. "Mom, what about my gold jewelry?" Chloe Ashworth suddenly spoke up. "You promised me that as soon as she married in, you'd make her buy me a whole set of gold jewelry. Now she's run off, vanished without a trace. Did my gold jewelry fly away with her?" Something clicked in Ethan's mind. Sophia's parents had left her a considerable inheritance. Besides the houses and shops, there was a large sum of cash savings. Truthfully, while the Ashworths ostensibly supported her over the years, Ethan had heard whispers about how much of the Sterling family's money the Ashworths had actually spent. Now, unable to contact Sophia, but as long as her assets were still in her name, it meant she didn't truly intend to leave. She was just sulking, trying to scare him. "What's your hurry? When she comes back begging your brother to marry her, you can ask her for whatever you want, can't you?" Mrs. Ashworth said dismissively. Chloe still pouted. "Who knows when she'll be back? What if she never comes back? How could that be? You know how much she likes your brother." "True. If it weren't for the fact that she's truly devoted to my brother, I wouldn't have agreed to this marriage." Ethan suddenly turned and spoke. "Mom, go out right now and ask around." "Ask about what?" "Find out if those properties under Sophia's name are still there." Mrs. Ashworth immediately became anxious. Ethan, what do you mean by that? If they're still there, it means Sophia is just throwing a fit with me this time. If they're gone. Ethan gave a self-deprecating laugh, not finishing the sentence, but Mrs. Ashworth understood immediately. She couldn't sit still any longer and rushed out. I'll go ask around right now. Those few houses and the shops. Selling them isn't something that can be done overnight. Brother, what do you really mean? Did Sophia Sterling actually run away from the wedding? Chloe instantly panicked. She had bragged about this to all her cousins. If Sophia really ran away, wouldn't her jewelry be gone? Where would she hide her face? Ethan sneered, looking at her. Why are you so anxious now? Didn't you always dislike her? Didn't want her as a sister-in-law? Who would argue with money? Yes, who would argue with money? That's why the Ashworths looked down on Sophia while clinging desperately to the engagement. And himself, wasn't that what he thought deep down too? Sophia had money but no support system. All her relatives died in the earthquake, and she was utterly devoted to him. Marry her, and her assets would naturally become the Ashworth family's assets. That's why he could confidently apply for the overseas project without any worries. Chloe was base and selfish, but wasn't he just as much of a petty person? Brother, she wouldn't really leave, would she? Ethan walked out expressionlessly. I don't know. Brother, if she really left, what do we do? Chloe stamped her foot repeatedly. Mom said she wanted to move to a villa, the deposit's already paid. Ethan sneered coldly. Whoever wants to move pays for it. Brother. Ethan slammed the door behind him, shutting out the piercing cries. 14, I moved to a southern city I had always loved. When applying for university, I had followed Ethan to the capital. But my top choice university wasn't actually there. Now, with plenty of free time and financial independence, I finally had the means to pursue my own dream. After settling down, I bought a 2-bedroom apartment near that university. After resting for half a month, I started preparing for the postgraduate entrance exams. I couldn't attend university here, but studying for my master's here would be good too. In my past life, Ethan achieved fame and fortune, success in his career. He returned to a family reunion, moved into a new house, and married a new wife. He was truly riding the crest of success. But me. People say the whole city blooms like brocade, but my spring never arrived. The vibrant spring I missed in my past life, this life, I would make it bloom for myself. In the second month after settling down, Ethan Ashworth, who should have been on his overseas project, suddenly found me. It was a beautiful spring day, and I had just come out of the university library. I spotted Ethan standing downstairs immediately. He was much thinner, but still stood out in the bustling crowd. If not for that, I wouldn't have poured all my affection onto him during my impressionable teenage years. But now, the person whose gaze once made my heart pound and face flush. I could look at him calmly, without a ripple in my heart. I held my books and continued walking forward. Ethan called my name softly, Sophia. Is there something? I looked at him, my eyes cool, as if looking at any passing stranger. I've been looking for you. Looking for me for what? You are my fiancé, we have an engagement, we were formally engaged. Just engaged, no marriage license. It's not legally binding. Sophia? Ethan's white shirt was still impeccably clean. The way he looked wearing glasses used to be my favorite. Now he stood before me, looking just as he did when I adored him. But what difference did it make now? After you left, I thought a lot. About Vivian Vaughn, I admit I handled things poorly. I only admired some of her academic achievements. I have no romantic feelings for her. I've already made things clear with Vivian. She went abroad half a month ago and won't be coming back. Sophia, I promise, nothing like that will ever happen again. Come back with me. I never canceled the wedding arrangements. As soon as you return, we can have the wedding anytime. What makes you think I would go back with you? Is it because I used to like you so much? I looked at him and laughed. Ethan Ashworth, haven't you figured it out yet? From the moment I left, you became nothing to me. Sophia, I know what happened before hurt you. I've reflected on it. Nothing ever happened between me and Vivian Vaughn, I can swear. Does any of that matter? Ethan Ashworth, I don't care one bit about what happened between you and Vivian Vaughn, because I stopped liking you long ago. That's impossible. We grew up together, Sophia. You've liked me for so many years. Liking you for so many years didn't stop you from applying for the overseas project long ago, planning to leave right after the wedding ceremony, did it? Ethan's expression changed drastically. How did you know? I also know you were planning to go with Vivian Vaughn. If things went according to plan, you two would build a new home overseas. And I, left behind in the country, would be kept in the dark, fulfilling filial duties for you, taking care of your family, emptying my inheritance, being squeezed dry of all value, and then kicked out. Is that how it was supposed to go, Ethan Ashworth? His face was deathly pale, staring at me as if seeing a ghost. But I didn't let him off. I slowly took another step forward. If I'm not mistaken, your mother is seriously ill, isn't she? Ethan abruptly stepped back. How could you know? Timing-wise, Mrs. Ashworth should have just been diagnosed with a serious illness. She valued her pride immensely and kept it secret from friends and relatives. The news hadn't spread. So, Ethan Ashworth, you're coming to find me, asking me to go back. Is it truly because you realized your mistake and want to make amends, or is it just so I can return to be a caretaker for your mother, and incidentally hand over my inheritance to plug the bottomless pit of your family's expenses? How can you think of the Ashworth family like that? Ethan's face was livid. She did raise you for over 10 years. Even if there's no merit, there was effort, Sophia Sterling. The money the Ashworth family took over the years is enough repayment for that upbringing. Ethan Ashworth, stop looking for me. I have no connection to the Ashworth family anymore. And with you, there are no ties left either. With that, I walked past him towards the campus gate. But Ethan wouldn't give up, latching onto me again. Sophia, calm down, think it over carefully. All those years of feelings between us, can you really let go just like that? Yes, I let go long ago. Ethan Ashworth, you should let go too. Instead of pestering me here, you'd be better off figuring out how to earn more money. After all, your family will have plenty of expenses in the future. Sophia, are you really going to be this heartless? I found it somewhat amusing. Ethan Ashworth, when your whole family schemed against me, did any of you ever feel a shred of compassion? But Sophia, we didn't actually harm you. All of this is just your own speculation. So what if it is? Even if it's just speculation, I merely nipped the possibility in the bud. Is that not allowed? Sophia, we know each other inside and out. Can you guarantee that if you marry someone else in the future, they won't scheme against you? I laughed out loud. Is getting married the only path available to me? 15. Ethan lingered in the city for a week. He only left reluctantly after I reported him to the police. It seemed he understood I was determined not to turn back. After he left, he didn't bother me again. When I successfully got into the postgraduate program, classmates from my hometown contacted me privately. They said the Ashworth family's reputation was ruined. They were struggling to get by. Gradually, more insiders started revealing details, saying the family was ungrateful, heartless curs, bullying the daughter of their benefactor. So Mrs. Ashworth faced retribution, paralyzed in bed. Daniel Ashworth idled around outside, got into a lot of trouble, and spent several months in jail. Chloe Ashworth failed her college entrance exams and started dating a low-life boyfriend. Wanting to avoid caring for her own mother, she simply moved into her boyfriend's place. The entire Ashworth household relied solely on Ethan for support. The huge medical bills, plus the penalty for defaulting on the villa deposit Mrs. Ashworth had made, completely drained Ethan's personal savings. He was in a miserable state now, former classmates and friends no longer associated with him. Hearing this, I merely smiled and dismissed it. Without me, the big blood bag for the whole family to suck dry, their lives were indeed difficult now. But what did any of that have to do with me? I had houses, a car, substantial savings, and could continue enjoying a carefree student life. Perhaps I would meet someone I liked again in the future, or perhaps not. Living alone would be fine too. The filthy mire of the Ashworth family could no longer disgust me in the slightest. Later, I heard that Ethan abandoned his family and got back together with Vivian Vaughn. He even followed her to settle down in another major city. Vivian bore him a son, and their life seemed quite decent. But after a few years, Ethan returned alone from that city, looking dejected. By then, the Ashworth family had sold everything they could. Only a dilapidated rental unit remained. Mrs. Ashworth, lacking proper treatment and care, had died the previous year. Daniel Ashworth ran off to engage in online fraud operations overseas, his fate unknown. Chloe Ashworth married early, had 3 children, and suffered domestic abuse frequently. Ethan lived alone in the shabby rental, drinking heavily day in and day out. The son Vivian bore was not his. She had gotten together with him initially just to find a convenient father figure for her child. Once he had worked hard to raise the child, Vivian got back together with the biological father and kicked Ethan out. When I returned to my hometown for my parents' death anniversary, I saw him once. Only in his early 30s, his hair was already mostly white. Reeking of alcohol, he sat listlessly on the street corner. Passers-by looked at him with utter disgust. Who could tell this was the once dazzling Ethan Ashworth? My heart wasn't filled with saintly pity for him, but still there was a touch of wistfulness. Actually, when we were both just children, Ethan had been very, very kind to me. It was only later, when we both grew up, that we both changed. As I walked past him, he seemed to recognize me and stood up excitedly. But then he suddenly turned away, burying his face in his hands. I pretended not to have seen him, not to have recognized him, and continued walking forward without pause. Another spring arrived. Another year of flowers blooming like brocade. I would not look back, nor would I forgive. I would simply forever, continuously, walk forward into Sophia Sterling's own spring. End of story. End of the first story. Subscribe to my channel if you like my stories. Don't miss the second exciting story. Story 2. Everyone knew I was Julian West's simp. I took a knife for him, gave up everything, had no dignity. But when I was kidnapped, Julian mistook it for a setup I arranged to hurt his white moonlight. He let the kidnappers rough me up, sneering, "Chloe, stop acting. You make me sick." Later, I found out I'd gotten the wrong person. Returning to the time before the final exams, under everyone's shocked gaze, I recklessly blocked that roguish youth. "Dylan, I came to see you." Meanwhile, Julian stared intently at me, growing desperate. So the one you always wanted to look after, it was never me. When the kidnappers made Julian choose between the two of us, he chose to save his white moonlight. That was within my expectations. Protecting the pitiful-looking white moonlight in his arms, Julian's expression grew impatient as he looked at me. "Chloe, are you done acting? If you are, then get lost. It's truly disgusting." Even though the knife the kidnapper held at my neck had already drawn blood, Julian was convinced this whole kidnapping scene was intentionally staged by me. All because his white moonlight had said, "They've been much gentler with Chloe." She deliberately turned her head as she said it, revealing the slap mark on her face. That mark was made half an hour before Julian arrived, when she had arrogantly ordered the kidnappers to create it. Julian, naturally, believed her. "Since Mr. West has made his choice, then we'll leave this one for the boys," the kidnapper leader said with a malicious grin. He tore open my clothes right in front of Julian. Julian's gaze faltered for a moment, but he quickly acted nonchalant again. "Chloe," his voice was icy, "I don't have time to play these childish games with you, but if you're going to put on a show, you could at least have your people make the act more convincing. Otherwise, how could I possibly believe this half-hearted performance?" Julian looked at me, his eyes filled with the familiar mockery. "Julian," I called his name, then suddenly smiled. "I think I made a mistake about something." Everyone knew I was Julian West's simp. So devoted I had no dignity, completely at his beck and call. Even though Julian despised me, I would rush out in the middle of the night at a single phone call, only to be mocked by Julian's friends, just like a dog. I would help Julian prepare for banquets even when I was sick, even if it was a celebration party for his white moonlight. Until I saw a photograph in his study, Julian had an unknown twin brother. He died at 17. Staring blankly at the wild, bold character, Yi, Chinese letter scrawled on the photo. I dimly felt I might have made a terrible mistake. So I spent a lot of energy trying to find out about Dylan West. But the information I gathered was scarce. The only thing I knew was that Dylan, at 17, had been accused of the attempted assault of a girl. The West family, feeling disgraced, suppressed all news. They effectively erased Dylan's existence along with it. Instinctively, I didn't believe it. But before I could find the truth, I was kidnapped. Julian didn't react at first. After a moment, he gave a cold smirk. How rare. I thought you were convinced everything you did was right. Julian loathed me, largely because I was someone his parents had placed by his side. He saw my presence as a form of monitoring and a humiliation. Only this one thing. The physical pain was growing numb. Julian's white moonlight was no pushover. She had the men hit me where the clothes would hide the bruises. I swallowed the metallic taste in my throat and said softly, only this one thing was wrong. Julian laughed out loud. He seemed about to say more, but his gaze suddenly froze. Because, following orders, the kidnappers had thrown me, bound hand and foot, off the boat. This was likely unexpected for Julian. In the split second before I was thrown, I vaguely saw Julian instinctively rush towards me. But it didn't matter anymore. For it seemed I was reborn. I stared blankly at the worn-out, ill-fitting clothes on my body, my slender, pale hands covered in calluses. During those years by Julian's side, I had always taken care of my hands. The calluses had long since vanished. Right now, I was being dragged forcefully, accompanied by familiar insults. What's the point of girls studying? I see you've been corrupted. Think you've grown wings, what can you achieve with studying? In the end, you'll just end up benefiting someone else's family. What's wrong with the match the family found for you? Let me tell you, I've already taken the money. You'll marry him whether you like it or not. Your brother needs that money to buy a house. Stunned for a moment, I forgot to struggle, letting my mother in name only drag me several meters across the ground. The thin fabric tore, scraping my skin raw over a large area. The pain brought me back to my senses, and I instinctively tried to break free. Let go of me, however. This malnourished body was no match for a woman accustomed to farm work. Dark memories I had deliberately tried to forget, along with a bone-deep fear, instantly overwhelmed me. I bit back a scream, pulling back with one hand while fumbling in my backpack with the other. I always kept a utility knife in my backpack. Just as my fingers closed around it, a flamboyant voice I only remembered echoed. Damn, are human traffickers this bold now? Snatching innocent girls in broad daylight, familiar tone. Familiar line. I stared blankly at the boy silhouetted against the light, overcome by an inexplicable, intense sadness. It was the same in my past life. Few people passed this way during the lunch break. My mom had lured me out with an excuse, then tried to drag me back home by force. It was Dylan who appeared and stopped her. He gave my mom some money and told her to stop bothering my studies. Later, when I didn't have money for school, it was a company that sponsored me. The boss of that company had the surname West. Really? Short hair, short sight, Dylan started, then stopped abruptly, seeing my mom's short hair, modifying his words. He impatiently pulled a wallet from his uniform pocket, extracting a stack of bills. You just want money, right? Here. Stop bothering her studies in the future. My mom's face instantly lit up. She licked her thumb and counted the bills, then shamelessly feigned difficulty. Young master, this isn't quite enough. Dylan tesked. The 16 or 17-year-old boy stood tall and straight, easily drawing everyone's attention. He took off the ring on his hand, about to toss it to my mom. Take this and exchange it. My mom, grinning, was about to grab it, but I snatched it first. Her face darkened, raising her hand to strike. You worthless girl, but her hand never fell, because my utility knife was pointed right at her. That man only offered $1,000 for the marriage, I panted heavily, staring hard at her. This stack is at least $2,000. It's enough. Trying to marry someone for only $1,000? What kind of idiot is that? Dylan scoffed, his tone full of disdain. He subtly moved closer to me, blocking my mother's path. My grip on the utility knife tightened. Expressionless, I said, "If you keep playing games, I don't mind taking you down with me." "You care most about your precious son, don't you?" Perhaps the look of almost suicidal determination in my eyes scared her. She didn't dare ask for the ring anymore, muttered some vulgar curses, and fled as if escaping. I kept the utility knife raised, until my mother's figure completely disappeared, until Dylan suddenly chuckled, patted my head lightly, and said in a teasing tone, "Looking so thin and weak, I didn't expect you'd dare pull out a knife." "What, so young and already daring to kill?" I remained silent. I just put away the utility knife and quietly stared at Dylan. He looked exactly like the Julian I knew, only much younger. The only slight difference was perhaps the small dark mole on the tip of Dylan's nose, but it was hardly noticeable unless you looked closely. "Why are you staring at me?" Dylan uncomfortably touched his nose, then exaggeratedly let out a "ha." "You're not admitting you dare to kill, are you?" I still didn't answer. Dylan paused, then muttered a soft, "Damn." Dylan didn't head back to school but wandered aimlessly through the streets. I followed him until he grew impatient. "Seriously, are you going to follow me into the men's room too?" He deliberately emphasized men's room. My gaze fell on the school uniform jacket tied around his waist, and I asked irrelevantly, "Why aren't you in class?" It was no longer the lunch break. "Then why aren't you?" Dylan laughed out of exasperation, retorting, "I took leave." He was momentarily speechless, looking a bit displeased. I thought Dylan would get angry, but he just ran a hand through his hair and then pointed at me. I was confused. "Bros gotta go save pitiful girls like you," he said with mock seriousness. "Studying just slows down my path to becoming a world hero." So immature, completely different from Julian, but I still mistook them. For a moment, indescribable despair and sadness suffocated me, making it hard to breathe. I stumbled slightly, which startled Dylan. "Hey kid, what's your name?" I heard my own hoarse voice. I grabbed Dylan's arm. He was lean, but his forearm muscles were firm. I saw Dylan mouth the name Julian and interrupted. "I need to know your name, so I know who to find to pay back the money later, right?" Earlier, I had tried to return the ring to Dylan, but he refused. "It's just a useless trinket to me." Dylan tossed the ring into my backpack without looking. "But at least it can be exchanged for some cash. I'm not like you. Money is the one thing I don't lack, and so, the excuse of repaying him arose." I stared at Dylan without blinking until his gaze flickered and he instinctively looked away. "Kid, you're surprisingly strong." He suddenly laughed, then easily broke free from my grasp. "You really want to pay me back?" "Yes. That little thing might just be a metal ring, but it's a bit expensive. I'll be able to repay it someday." "Such a stubborn mule," Dylan muttered under his breath, but he quickly grinned, reaching out and patting my head. "All right then, remember, Dylan. My name is Dylan." 7 after telling me his name, Dylan refused to say more. On the way back, I tried to strike up a conversation. But every time I tried to learn more about him, he skillfully changed the subject. His face still wore that flamboyant and seemingly carefree smile. So I could only give up for the time being. "You're very good at studying." As we reached the school gate, Dylan suddenly made this out of the blue remark. I didn't react immediately, just mmhmm'd and looked up at him, then realized belatedly. "You know me? The top student who always beats Julian West in scores, Chloe Ashton," Dylan grinned. "I know you." I still had many questions for Dylan, but the security guard had spotted us and yelled, "You two students over there, why are you still outside during class time? Were you skipping class for a date?" "No," I instinctively turned to explain to the guard, but just as I spoke, a very soft voice whispered near my ear, accompanied by the boy's fresh, clean scent. He said, "Keep going. I'm counting on you to knock that stinky kid down a peg." Dylan chuckled lightly, then turned and ran off before the guard could reach us. He didn't look back, yet seemed to know I was watching, waving casually over his shoulder, back still turned to me. The afternoon sun landed on his hair, reflecting a hint of red beneath the black. I suspected I'd seen wrong, but he quickly disappeared into the shadows by the corner wall. "Where's the other male student?" not from our school. You youngsters these days. The guard arrived, lecturing endlessly. I listened quietly, but Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, when I reached into my pocket and felt something hard. It was Dylan's ring. He must have slipped the ring back into my uniform pocket then. I owed Dylan too much already. Keep going. The nonchalant voice seemed to echo in my ear again. He must have put the ring in my uniform pocket around that time. The security guard's nagging continued. I gripped the ring tightly and gave a slight quirk of my lips. All right, owing a lot isn't much different from owing a little. 8 returning to high school wasn't exactly a happy occasion for me. The oppression from my family, the strange looks from classmates and bullying, the teacher's favoritism. These things were enough to make me break down and retreat into my own little world, full of self-loathing. Until I met Dylan. Until I met Dylan again. Why is it you again? Dylan, with a cigarette dangling from his lips, sized me up with surprise and couldn't help but tesk. Maybe you should go pray somewhere. Your forehead looks dark. You're definitely a magnet for bad luck. He spoke meaningfully. Behind Dylan were several girls trembling with fear, terrified by the punk followers he had brought along. I quietly picked up the books scattered in the mud, trampled underfoot. Just like last time, these people still took pleasure in bullying me. And Dylan would appear, just like last time, to rescue me. The only difference, perhaps, was that I hadn't been knocked unconscious, and Dylan hadn't taken me to the hospital only to leave immediately. He scratched his head, crouched down to help me pick up the books. I'm serious, Dylan pouted. Both times I've seen you, you were being bullied. Shouldn't you really go pray? I know a place that's supposedly quite effective. He started chuckling at his own words. Don't get me wrong, I really feel like a hero saving the damsel right now. Brother Yi, you're the hero, but this little girl isn't exactly beautiful. One of his followers couldn't resist interjecting. You talk too much crap, Dylan cursed. He was about to comfort me, but fell into an awkward silence upon seeing my dry hair and ill-fitting old uniform. Finally, he turned and asked his followers stiffly, "Got any tissues or a handkerchief? Brother Yi, didn't you say carrying that stuff was girly?" Dylan was speechless for a moment. He instinctively glanced at the pale-faced girls, then looked away in disgust. Forget it, using theirs would be unlucky anyway. Dylan snorted coldly, then simply used his sleeve to wipe the dirty water off the books before handing them to me. He seemed completely unconcerned about dirtying his expensive jacket. Take a look, are the notes inside still usable? The hand holding the books was long and fair, but the fingertips were somehow smudged with dirt. I suddenly remembered waking up in the hospital last time. The stack of books on the nightstand had also been carefully wiped clean of the dirty water, then neatly arranged close to me. Dylan, I came back to my senses, didn't open the books but looked up at Dylan, suppressing the tremor in my voice. I couldn't find you. 9, I couldn't find Dylan. Other than knowing his name and that he was Julian's brother, I knew nothing about Dylan. I remembered the uniform jacket tied around his waist that day. It was the standard style for North High. But there was no Dylan West at North High. Only Julian. And Dylan would die silently in his 17th year, this very year. But I couldn't find Dylan, not in the last life, nor in this one. This realization made me panic instinctively, so I decided to take a gamble. I followed these girls, listened to their unrestrained insults and mockery, watched my backpack being ripped off. The books inside mercilessly trampled Dylan appeared. He raised an eyebrow, looking at me with a mix of disdain and exasperation. Why is it you again? Dylan was taken aback by my words. He almost reflexively said, "You couldn't take me in a fight." As soon as he said it, Dylan's followers couldn't help but burst out laughing. Realizing his blunder, he coughed lightly in embarrassment, then hastily shoved the books into my hands. I, he pointed at himself, am a standard punk. He pointed at me. You are the top student who beats Julian in the standardized tests. If you started hanging out with me, what kind of mess would that be? Dylan started laughing at his own words, until he met my silent gaze and his smile slowly faded. Wait, are you serious? Dylan's tone grew increasingly frantic. I even heard him mutter under his breath, "It's over, it's over. If old Dew knew you wanted to follow me, he'd skin me alive." Old Dew was Mr. David Davies, my homeroom teacher in 10th grade, and the only teacher who was really good to me. Dylan knew Mr. Davies. It was even possible they had a good relationship. I quietly noted this down, then called him, "Dylan." "What?" I smiled at him, then walked over to the girl who had led the bullying. Several crisp slapping sounds echoed. Everyone, including Dylan, froze. Only the lead bully started screaming like crazy. "I have a fruit knife in my backpack." My tone was calm as I continued, "I actually have nothing, so I don't care about losing anything." Julian had once called me a calm lunatic. That time, a man was attacking people randomly on the street, while Julian was strolling with his recently returned white moonlight. I took a stab for Julian, then somehow managed to subdue the man. Julian was terrified then, his hands trembling as he pressed on my wound. "Lunatic," he cursed me, his eyes red. "No matter how calm you pretend to be, deep down, you're still a lunatic." I didn't speak, just looked at Julian and smiled. Back then, I mistook Julian for Dylan, so I had to protect him. He was never wrong about me. I really was a lunatic. "Are you scared?" I watched the girl in front of me snap her mouth shut and gave her a reassuring smile. "There's nothing to be afraid of. After all, I haven't had the chance yet to—" "Shit," Dylan was the first to jump up. He muttered a few curses under his breath, then without a word, pulled me towards him, away from the girl. Then he looked down at me and asked, "Where'd you get the knife? Didn't I take away that utility knife of yours? The ring you gave me could buy many." Dylan paused, his expression turning fierce, his volume shooting up. "Did I give you that thing so you could buy knives? So Dylan, I'm not the good student you think I am." I looked up, staring at Dylan. A long, long time ago, when my parents beat and scolded me, forbidding me from school, when I was bullied again and again, the string called sanity had always been stretched taut. So taut that just one more straw, and it would snap completely. My utility knife never left my side. So, the Dylan from my past life would never know that he had once unintentionally done something truly great. "So Dylan," I licked my somewhat dry lips, then carefully pinched a corner of Dylan's shirt. "Can I follow you?" I had followed Julian countless times, but it only made him resent me more. I wanted to follow Dylan, I wanted to protect Dylan. But I didn't want him to hate me. So I quickly retracted my hand from his shirt, quietly awaiting his judgment. Dylan's followers let out gasps, followed by teasing shouts. But Dylan himself showed no reaction. Until after a long moment, not more than twice. He bent down, picked up my backpack, took out the fruit knife, and tusked. But after a glance, Dylan shoved it back in, along with the books he had wiped clean. Then he handed it all to me. He said, "The third time we meet, I'll give you my answer." 11 likely startled by my actions that day, Dylan had his followers take turns following me, only leaving after seeing me safely home. Because of the money Dylan gave her, my mother behaved herself for a while, though sometimes she would yell indirect insults at the top of her lungs. "The little beast I raised dares to threaten me with a knife. She's completely out of line." But she didn't dare say it to my face, nor did she dare hit me. Because my dad was away working, I ignored her, just occasionally sharpened my knife in front of her. It scared my mom so much, she repeatedly told my little brother to stay away from me. The classmates who ganged up on me were disciplined too. Mr. Davies personally met with their parents. They tried to argue, but Mr. Davies wasn't interested in discussion and simply played a video in front of the parents. Dylan had given him the video. Perhaps he had done the same in my past life. Nothing was more convincing than this video. Even when those girls accused me of carrying a fruit knife to threaten them, no one believed them. So I became the unequivocal victim of this bullying incident. They were forced to bow their heads and apologize to me publicly. Once everyone else had left the office, Mr. Davies finally asked me, "Where's the knife?" The girl I had threatened had previously demanded to search my backpack, but found nothing. Mr. Davies and I stood in a standoff for a moment before I silently patted my own pocket. Mr. Davies' eyes widened in a glare. He was so angry he had to drink a whole glass of iced tea to calm down. Troublemaker, both troublemakers, he pointed at me, scolding. Just like Dylan, both stubborn mules you can't control. No wonder that stinky kid repeatedly reminded me to keep an eye on you. I thought you were usually quiet, didn't expect you had such hidden depths. I stood there silently taking the scolding, which unexpectedly made Mr. Davies even angrier. He slammed his hand on the table. Even this shameless, doesn't care anymore look is exactly like Dylan's. Finally, the warning bell rang, interrupting Mr. Davies' lecture. Chloe, remember this. He waved me off to class but then called me back, his expression serious. There are many paths you can take. If this one doesn't work, change course. Don't let this corner you. Your life is still long, no need to ruin your future over a moment of impulse. I nodded, then asked Mr. Davies, "Why doesn't Dylan come to school?" Dylan. Mr. Davies wasn't surprised I asked about Dylan. He cursed playfully. Do you two think I'm some kind of information broker? If you want to know about him, go ask him yourself. All I can say is, Dylan has his own path to walk. I nodded, indicating I understood. I didn't know what Dylan's path was, but I knew, this time, I would work hard to ensure Dylan could walk his path safely and smoothly. This was the path I've chosen for myself. 12. I saw Dylan again a week later, at the physics competition. The competition was held at another school, and he came to pick up Julian. This was also the first time I'd seen Julian since my rebirth. He was much thinner and weaker than Dylan, his face bearing an approachable smile. Even though they had identical faces, I could now easily tell them apart. My seat was right in front of Julian's. He looked slightly stunned when he saw me, then managed a somewhat stiff, faint smile. A far cry from the sharp mockery of my past life. I quickly looked away, quietly waiting for the competition to begin. Did I hate Julian? Not really, not that much. After all, I was the one who mistook him from the start, clinging to him, thinking I was doing good, constantly pestering him. It was only natural for Julian not to like me. 13. Julian finished the test a few minutes before me. As I walked out of the school gate, I saw him standing with Dylan. Dylan wore a baseball cap and a mask, his arm casually draped over Julian's shoulder, his whole demeanor loose and completely different from Julian's. I walked towards Dylan. Julian saw me first. He paused slightly, instinctively wanting to turn away, but couldn't suppress a small upward twitch of his lips. From beginning to end, Julian's gaze remained fixed on me, until he saw me walk past him and stop beside Dylan. Dylan, I looked only at Dylan the entire time. I came to see you. This was our third meeting. Dylan had said that the third time we met, he would give me the answer I wanted. You recognized me even when I'm disguised like this. Dylan was surprised, then CHUCKLED Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. What a stubborn mule. Wanna grab some food? Your broye is treating, I nodded. I didn't look at Julian, so I never noticed the color instantly drain from his face the moment I called out Dylan, leaving him deathly pale. Xiao Wang, you coming? Dylan asked Julian. It's just a regular noodle shop, you might not be used to it. Using Julian's nickname, Xiao Wang, from the mapping, Julian came from a wealthy family, accustomed to luxury, and was picky about everything. In this aspect, Dylan was very different from him again. I thought Julian would refuse. Okay. But surprisingly, he agreed. His voice was a little hoarse. 14. The owner of the diner knew Dylan well and even gave us extra side dishes. Dylan and I ate heartily. Only Julian put down his chopsticks after a few bites, unable to stop frowning. I knew you wouldn't be used to it, Dylan teased, handing him a bottle of water. Maybe you should have Mr. Ward come pick you up. No need. Julian refused. He looked at me, his eyes holding an unreadable emotion. How? Did you meet my brother? Brother, ye saved me, I thought for a moment, deciding to tell Julian. Twice, so I'm very grateful to him. This little girl is the one I told you about before. Dylan opened a beer, then raised an eyebrow at me. Want some? I shook my head. He laughed again. See? A little girl who doesn't smoke or drink, yet she's brave enough to use a knife against her bullies. This statement seemed to surprise Julian. His lips moved, and finally, he just whispered, "I didn't know. You think just because you're a bit smarter than me, you know everything." Dylan clearly misunderstood Julian's words, and Julian didn't bother explaining. Not long after, Mr. Ward, who had come looking for him, took Julian away. "You knew the second young master wasn't well, yet you still brought him to a place like this." Facing Dylan, Mr. Ward's attitude was clearly less respectful than towards Julian. His tone even carried a hint of resentment. In my memory, because of Julian's poor health, the entire West family treated him with extreme caution. Even so, this man's attitude towards Dylan still sparked anger in me that I couldn't suppress. So I stepped in front of Dylan, my tone stiff. It was Julian who wanted to come along. Dylan advised against it. Julian's eyelashes fluttered. He looked up at me, seemingly in disbelief. But Dylan just playfully nudged me, teasing, "Trying to shield me now? Do you really think your small frame could block anyone if trouble started?" He always had this nonchalant attitude. Even when misunderstood, he couldn't be bothered to explain. A nameless anger suddenly surged within me, directed partly at Dylan too. I glared fiercely at him. Perhaps sensing I was truly angry, Dylan awkwardly touched his nose, then expertly began to placate me. "I was just kidding. Our sister Kaio is so amazing, she could take down 10 strong men by herself." I remained silent, continuing to glare. "It's true, I wanted to come," Julian suddenly spoke, his voice painfully rough. "It has nothing to do with my brother, Mr. Ward." Looked somewhat embarrassed, but in the end, he just glanced at Dylan, then left with Julian. "If you keep glaring like that, your eyeballs are going to fall out." A sudden coolness touched my cheek. It was Dylan holding an iced soda can against my face. "Your face is all red. I don't even know what you're angry about." Although he said that, Dylan's eyes were filled with tiny sparks of amusement. "Why didn't you explain?" I suddenly remembered the information I gathered about Dylan in my past life. Unlearned, barbaric, troublemaker. These had practically become synonyms for Dylan, but I didn't believe them. Dylan thought for a moment, then replied with mock seriousness, "Because I don't have a mouth." Dylan responded with a casual "I," then reached out and ruffled my hair firmly. "Your broye isn't deaf, I can hear you. But you clearly, Julian and I look exactly alike." Dylan cut me off. He leaned down, his bright eyes staring into mine, his expression unusually serious. "He looks good, has a good personality, and gets good grades. If you need someone to look up to or just like this face, he's the better choice. If you're doing this just because I helped you out before, really, there's no need." Dylan chuckled softly. He straightened up, his voice lazy. "I'm full of flaws. The only halfway decent thing about me is maybe that I occasionally feel charitable. I'd give a stray cat or dog on the street a sausage, toss a coin or two to a beggar, let alone a pitiful little girl." The anger inside me gradually subsided. I watched Dylan quietly, once again sensing his deliberate distance. He seemed indifferent to everything. But I noticed that as he said these words, his hand hanging by his side was trembling slightly. He didn't mean what he said. So I told Dylan, "When I was born, my mother wanted to smother me, because she always wanted a son, but had 2 daughters in a row. She didn't succeed, because the villagers stopped her. Later, she wanted to sell me to someone else, but I knew the way back and found my way home. They didn't want me to study because they felt girls would eventually benefit someone else's family anyway, and the money was better spent buying nice clothes for my brother. So I always worked hard to earn my own tuition, never giving them any excuse to force me to drop out." Dylan fell silent too. "So Dylan, you'll never know how much of a hero you were when you showed up that day and stopped my mother." I felt my vision blurring, unable to even see Dylan's figure clearly anymore. Julian is great, but even if he were the best person in the world, he's not the light I want to follow. So even if you don't actually need, I opened my mouth but suddenly couldn't continue. What if Dylan didn't need it? What if Dylan, like Julian, didn't actually need this kind of useless repayment? I suddenly felt lost, even flustered, until Dylan suddenly burst out laughing. He laughed exaggeratedly, even covering his face with his hand, his shoulders shaking. This is the first time I've ever heard someone describe me as light. Mostly I just hear people calling me trash or mud. When he had laughed enough, he lowered his hand, looking at me with amusement. Then, in that helpless yet tolerant tone, he repeated, "Chloe, you really are a strange, stubborn mule." "But," Dylan added with a bright smile, "you're a lot like me." 15. Dylan allowed me to stay by his side. I thought it meant I could repay him more. But in reality, it was mostly Dylan taking care of me. He always bought an extra portion when he got breakfast, claiming one of his followers had quit, but he was just used to buying that much. "If you don't want it, just have Charlie throw it out." Using Charlie Chambers for Chinese letter, so I got to eat breakfast every day. Dylan asked me to tell him interesting things happening at school whenever we met. "I don't have much to do usually, and when I get bored, I look for some fun," Dylan scoffed with a smile. "I remember South High has a bunch of weirdos. Make sure to tell me about them." "Don't know any." "Then go ask." Using South High as a placeholder for Chinese letter, I rarely interacted with people. So naturally, I didn't know any weird stories about South High. But Dylan wanted to hear them. So I started trying to talk to the classmates around me, then dutifully recounted the gossip I heard to Dylan when we met. It always made Dylan roar with laughter. "I really want to know how you managed to keep a straight face while telling such funny stories." Dylan wiped tears from the corners of his eyes, laughing, then encouraged me. "Keep it up. South High still has plenty of weirdos waiting for you to discover." So I continued interacting with more classmates, chatting about gossip, talking about the strange happenings at South High. Until one day, my deskmate, with whom I'd always had a distant relationship, REMARKED Chinese letter. "I used to think you were some unapproachable, aloof top student who looked down on talking to us. I didn't expect you liked gossip too. Looks like even I have something in common with the academic superstar." Only then did I realize with a start that my relationships with the surrounding classmates had become much more harmonious. It felt like, for the first time, I truly belonged in this class. Realizing this, the next time I saw Dylan, I told him solemnly, "I want to actually do something for you." Dylan smiled, then asked back, "Do you think repayment can only be a one-way street?" I was stunned by the question. During those years when I mistook Julian for Dylan, that's exactly how I acted. I listened to Julian, protected him, did everything for him, even if he resented me for it. I spent 5 years trying to repay Julian in this way. Isn't it like that? Dylan seemed unsurprised by my reaction and patiently asked, "You told me gossip from South High, relieving my boredom. Is that true or not?" I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I was happy, so that can count as you repaying me, right?" I mumbled in agreement. "So what are you Chinese letter struggling about?" Dylan looked at me with amusement. "Chloe, why can't you try a way that makes you happier too?" Dylan told me that even repayment could have another path. A path that didn't have to be thorny. A path where you could also meet warm people. "Not even old enough, yet you overthink so much." Dylan scolded me laughingly again. "All right, if you really want to do something, lend me your notes for a few days." Most of the boys under his wing had dropped out of school due to family reasons. Dylan always said he led a group of punks. But in reality, after meeting Dylan, these boys hadn't caused any real trouble. "Even punks need education nowadays," Dylan told me, his tone serious. "Otherwise, you go out, get cursed at, and think someone's praising you." Notes from the future top scorer in the final exams? No matter how you look at it, were the ones benefiting. Dylan firmly believed I would be the top scorer, because he used to think his brother was the future top scorer. And since I could surpass Julian in standardized tests, I must be even better than his brother. However, in reality, when the notes were returned, they were organized even more meticulously, especially the math section. Key points I had overlooked were highlighted, and connections to previously learned concepts were helpfully added. Dylan said maybe one of his followers turned out to be a hidden talent, but Charlie secretly told me that Dylan had organized all of it. "Brother, ye might be weak in other subjects, but his math is incredibly good." Charlie looked immensely proud when he said this. Then, why doesn't he come to school? This was the second time I asked this question, but I received the same reply. Well, you have to ask Brother Yi yourself. Charlie scratched his head, looking troubled. Brother Yi told us not to talk about it, so I asked Dylan. I thought you'd hold it in for a while longer before asking. Dylan had a cigarette between his lips. He stubbed it out as he got closer to me, taking a slight step back. Will you tell me? I stared at Dylan's red hair. What I saw that day wasn't an illusion. Dylan had dyed his hair a flamboyant red, and the first time we met, he was substituting for a sick Julian at school, wearing a black wig. No, Dylan told me honestly. Little wooden block, knowing too much about me isn't a good thing. Dylan said my name, Kyo Chinese letter, sounded like wood Chinese letter Mudu, and I acted like a block of wood too. So I didn't press further. Instead, I recopied the notes Dylan had organized for me and shared them with my classmates. The monthly test was coming up soon. Oh my God, after the exam, my deskmate jumped up and down, hugging me. Kyo, your notes saved my life, especially in science. There were several concepts I missed, but they were all on the test this time. I absolutely love you, using nickname Kyo, as per mapping several other classmates who had used the notes also came to thank me. This attracted the attention of others who crowded around. What notes? What notes? Genius, save me. I lent them the notes, then told them. I didn't organize them, Dylan did. Dylan, one particularly well-informed classmate's face changed. Julian West's twin brother from North High? I paused, then nodded. Yes, then I don't want them. He immediately threw down the notes he had picked up, his face filled with disgust. A scumbag who could rape a girl in middle school and cause her death. What good notes could he possibly make? I advise you to stay away from him. Who knows when a scumbag like that will offend again? He's just trash, relying on his family's money to do whatever he wants. He spat out scumbag and trash, his expression superior, his tone dripping with contempt. Not satisfied, he stomped hard on the notes several times, as if touching them was like touching filthy mud. His words stunned everyone. I stared blankly at the clear footprints on the notes, my mind suddenly empty. By the time I reacted, I was already fighting with him. 16, my mother, of course, wouldn't come to the school, and Mr. Davies happened to be away on business. In the end, Dylan found someone to handle the situation for me. Now I know why you damn girl insisted on following me, Dylan sneered. You were just looking for a daddy figure to clean up your messes, weren't you? I lowered my head, silent. Even though my actual age was 8 years older than the 17-year-old Dylan, I was being scolded by him without daring to utter a word. But unexpectedly, Julian came too. He stood silently beside Dylan, his eyes dark as he watched Dylan tend to my wounds. Then, when Dylan stepped out for something, Julian suddenly blurted out, "Chloe doesn't fight." My movements, as I continued bandaging myself, didn't falter. So he repeated softly, 16-year-old Chloe doesn't fight because she's timid and cowardly, afraid of trouble, but 25-year-old Chloe does. She fights fiercely. Towards the end, Julian's voice was clearly trembling. He stared intently at me, his eyes bloodshot, finally choking out, "So Chloe, you came back too, right?" 17, I rarely dwelled on my high school years. But Julian's definitive, because she's timid and cowardly, afraid of trouble, made me laugh unexpectedly. You're right, I smiled at Julian, my eyes crinkling. So, 16-year-old Chloe was forcibly taken home after that bullying incident. She couldn't take the final exams, and later relied on the West family's sponsorship to repeat the year and go to university. Hearing this near confession, Julian's eyes instantly lit up. She accepted the West family's kindness and felt obligated to repay them. Later, at the West house, she saw the boy who had helped her back then and felt even more indebted to the family. I paused, then shook my head helplessly. I never regret the things I've done. But Julian, this time, I think I really did make a mistake. Julian vaguely sensed what I was about to say, his breathing growing rapid. His health was poor, and now he was gasping heavily, clutching his chest, his face devoid of color. So I stopped talking. If something happened to Julian, Dylan would be very worried. I wasn't surprised that Julian had also been reborn. It wasn't that I had already guessed. It was just that, for the current me, neither the 17-year-old Julian nor the 25-year-old Julian really had much to do with me anymore. Julian knew me well too. So, after composing himself, he asked, almost grinding his teeth, "So the one you always wanted to look after, it was never me. So after finding out the truth, you refused to spare even a shred of thought for me, is that right?" I didn't answer. Despair gradually filled Julian's eyes. He stepped forward, grabbing my wrist, his grip so tight it felt like he wanted to crush it. He asked, word by word, "On what grounds do you think saying, 'I made a mistake,' makes everything just go away?" "Chloe, on what grounds?" So I paid the price too. His grip hurt, but it was within my tolerance. So I smiled at Julian and said softly, "So I died. Isn't that price enough for your resentment?" Perhaps the word died touched a raw nerve in Julian. He released my hand, a bitter smile on his face. "Yes, so you died. And you deserved it." Julian shed his usual gentle demeanor, turning his sharp thorns on me again. "Chloe, you should have seen yourself after you died. When they pulled you out, your body was swollen from the water, so bloated you couldn't even make out your face. You really should have seen how ugly you looked after death." He seemed to want to provoke my anger with these words. But Julian didn't know that a long, long time ago, I had abandoned such useless emotions. So I sighed. "Then it must have been troublesome for you to go through the effort of retrieving my body. Wasted quite a bit of money, didn't it?" Julian choked on my words. He wanted to say more, but was interrupted by Dylan walking in. "What body?" He vaguely heard some words, looked suspiciously between us, then laughed in exasperation. "You just hurt your hand, right? Don't worry, you won't die. But if you fight again next time, I guarantee I'll kill you first." Dylan stared at me, finally pulling a sinister smile. I turned my head, pretending not to hear, which made him reach out and mess up my hair, muttering about me being a wooden stubborn mule. Julian watched our interaction in silence. 18, the fight incident eventually fizzled out. But because of it, I finally learned why Dylan hadn't been able to continue school. Because back then, someone saw a girl run out of an alley, clothes disheveled, terrified. She ran in such a panic that she didn't see the traffic, darted into the road, and was hit by a car. Shortly after, Dylan ran out too. The girl didn't die but became a vegetative patient and is still in the hospital. There were no surveillance cameras in that area, so Dylan, who ran out afterward, became the presumed culprit in everyone's eyes. Even though Dylan explained many times it wasn't him, that he was just trying to save the girl. But since the man Dylan claimed tried to assault the girl was never found, and the only person who could prove Dylan's innocence lay unconscious in a hospital bed, everyone thought it was just Dylan's excuse. No one believed him, including his own parents, because everyone thought Dylan was a good-for-nothing punk, and a punk's word couldn't be trusted. What the West parents did for Dylan was force him to drop out of school, bring him back to the West estate, and use forceful means to suppress the incident. Actually, back then, Dylan wasn't a punk at all, Mr. Davies told me, his face showing anger. He just wanted to give those kids a chance to turn their lives around. That's why he associated with them. But besides me, no one believed. Not the teachers, not the students, not even Dylan's parents believed someone could be genuinely kind enough to try and guide a group of unruly punks towards a better path. Especially just a middle schooler. "Do you know why Dylan fought?" Mr. Davies asked me again. I was silent for a moment, then gave the answer. "Because of Julian." Julian's health was poor, and the entire West family treated him like fragile glass. But the family couldn't have someone following Julian around constantly. So the person who spent the most time with Julian was Dylan. "See, even you know the reason. How could his parents not understand?" Mr. Davies' smile was exceptionally mocking. I recalled the Mr. and Mrs. West I had met in my past life and thought, perhaps they knew from the beginning. The West family always valued their reputation immensely, even if Dylan fought to protect Julian. The moment he threw a punch, He transformed from victim to perpetrator. The West parents could accept Dylan being a temporary victim, but not a constant perpetrator. So, between Dylan and Julian, they simply chose the more obedient, better-performing Julian, who could bring more benefits to the West family. "Chloe," Mr. Davies patted my shoulder, sighing, "sometimes I really think you two are quite alike." 19. The incident resurfaced. The forceful suppression by the West family back then resulted in a more severe backlash this time. And the main culprit triggering this backlash was me. I went looking for Dylan but couldn't find him. I thought he was angry. But before I could find a way to explain to Dylan, my father returned. He used the excuse that I fought and was disobedient to forcibly drag me back home, and no one stopped him. Perhaps thinking the head of the household was back, my mother added fuel to the fire, exaggerating how lawless I had been recently. "I bet in a few years, she'll just run off with some random wild man." She cursed me with the most vicious words. Even my little brother joined in, hitting me with his toy car. "Don't run away, get exchanged for money, buy me toys." The metal toy car hit my forehead. Blood trickled down, blurring my vision, but I just quietly watched this family. Probably reminded by my mother. The first thing my father did after dragging me home was strip off my clothes and find the knife I had hidden. I stood nearly naked before them, my emotions numbly detached. They locked me in the house. As punishment, my mother starved me for several days. The little bit of weight Dylan had helped me gain was completely gone. "Does that family still want her?" I heard my father ask my mother. "Go contact them, tell them to add more to the bride price, and just marry this damn girl off." They hid all the sharp objects in the house. To prevent me from escaping, my hands and feet were almost always tied, except during meals. I seemed to have returned to the darkest period of my past life, but this time I was calm. I had planned my escape route. The worst outcome would be mutual destruction. But I didn't expect Julian to burst in with the police on the day I was supposed to be sold to the old man. 20 to prevent any mishaps, the two had basically finalized the price and wanted to marry me off immediately. The man was even wearing an old-fashioned, bright red wedding outfit, and the people around were congratulating him happily, completely ignoring me, bound hand and foot. That's when Julian burst in with the police. Bastards, his eyes were red with anger, his hands trembling as he untied me. He took off his own coat and covered the glaring red wedding dress I wore. But apart from those two words, Julian didn't say anything else. "Someone reported you for suspected illegal kidnapping." "It's just an engagement, my father explained to the police with a fawning smile. "Country girls marry early, we're just letting her get engaged first. She'll marry when she's an adult, it's not illegal." Right, that's how it is. Besides, this is a family matter, you police can't interfere in family affairs, right?" My mother chimed in from the side. The man stood there, dumbfounded, not daring to speak. "I'm reporting." Having not had water or food for a long time, my voice was extremely hoarse. "I'm reporting them for suspected human trafficking." As soon as I said this, the police officer's expressions turned grim. 21, I once had an older sister. But after I became old enough to work, I never saw her at home again, because my mother sold her. Sold her to an old widower to bear children. She was tied up by her father in name only, and delivered to the old widower's house. To prevent her from escaping, he even broke her leg. So, from a very young age, I knew what fate awaited me. When they discovered I had a talent for studying, they decided to let me go to school. Because educated girls fetched a higher price, I thought my sister was the first, but I later learned they weren't first-time offenders. My sister wasn't the first girl they had ruined. In my past life, I spent a lot of effort gathering evidence and personally sent them to prison. Doing it again was much easier. I led the police to the basement, where 3 unconscious young girls were still locked up. There was also an account book in my mother's room. It recorded every girl they had trafficked over the years and the price they sold them for. And the latest entry was my name. Price tag, $3,000. 22, with conclusive evidence, the two were immediately taken away by the police. Before being led away, my father glared at me fiercely, breathing heavily, while my mother cursed me with all sorts of vulgar language, wishing me a horrible death. My little brother picked up his small metal car and charged at me without fear, yelling, "I'll beat you, you money-losing item." He was only 6 years old. Julian stepped in front of me, easily blocking all his moves. "Get lost," my brother burst into tears, frightened. To cooperate with the investigation, Julian and I also went to the police station. Hearing them repeatedly say, "Thank you, student Julian," I couldn't help but feel a bit dazed. By the time we came out, it was almost dark. Julian, who had maintained a polite smile all day, couldn't help but rub his tired face. I still prefer your red hair." He turned to look at me, about to say something, but I calmly cut him off. Julian paused, then emphasized, "The one with red hair is my brother." I stopped walking and told him, "Only Dylan gets to look after me. And only Dylan can take me away." Julian, or rather Dylan, who had swapped places with Julian again, laughed in exasperation. "Fine," he refused to admit his identity, striding forward. "Then you wait right here, let's see if he comes to get you." I remained silent. Dylan left. Later in the evening, it suddenly started raining. I found a roadside bench and sat down, quietly thinking about what else I could do for Dylan. Then I realized Chinese letter, dismay, and confusion that, during this time, it seemed I had only been causing trouble for Dylan. This was completely different from when I was with Julian. No matter how much Julian despised me, he could never find fault with my work. I could always handle everything perfectly for Julian, but why was it different now? I lowered my head, lost in thought, until a familiar voice approached from afar. "Damn it, don't you even know how to find shelter when it's raining?" 23, it was Dylan, having returned. He wasn't carrying an umbrella either, running over soaking wet, and without a word tried to pull me away. "Dylan," I called his name, then smiled. "This time, I really don't have a home anymore." I felt no sadness saying this, only liberation. Actually, I had said something similar to Julian once before. That was the only time I showed my vulnerable side to Julian. But Julian had said, "Chloe, do you think you're any better than your parents?" So I never spoke of it again. But this time was different. This time, I had found Dylan. So I gathered my courage and carefully asked the question I hadn't dared to ask in my previous life. "So Dylan, could you look after me one more time?" Dylan was silent for a moment. This time he didn't deny it, but gave me a sideways glance with a wry twist of his lips, speaking gruffly. "When have I not looked after you? I've practically been feeding and cleaning up after you." I couldn't help but chuckle, but my eyes stung terribly. 24, Dylan always called me a wooden block. "Just because I called you little wooden block a few times, you really think you've turned into a wood spirit, needing to drink rainwater and absorb the essence of heaven and earth?" But when he saw the wounds on my body, the lecture he was about to give got stuck in his throat. Finally, he managed to force out a few words. "Those bastards, I should have rushed over and kicked them a few more times." Then he started talking about other things, trying to distract me. "Finally healed, I thought you were angry." I looked down at the bandaged wound, somewhat dazed. "I kept saying I wanted to repay you, but I only end up causing you trouble every time. I thought you were angry, so I couldn't find you again." "Why would you think I was angry?" "Because you didn't want those things brought up." "Just because I don't want them brought up doesn't mean people will stop talking about them. I can't shut everyone's mouth." Dylan chuckled, then told me, "I wasn't angry, just had some things to deal with back home for a few days. If I were really angry, would I have gone through all the trouble to save you?" Later, I found out that because the incident was brought up again, Dylan had been forcibly taken back to the West Estate by his angry parents. Worried that I wouldn't be able to find him, that I would overthink things and something might happen, Dylan had spent those days trying desperately to get out. Finally, Julian suggested they switch places. So Dylan starved himself until he looked as weak and sickly as Julian, then swapped identities with Julian to escape. But Dylan never mentioned any of this. He just said that the identity of Dylan wasn't suitable for appearing at the police station. "So how did you recognize me?" Clearly, Dylan was more interested in this. He rubbed his chin. "Even my parents couldn't tell us apart." I didn't know how to explain. It felt like as soon as Dylan appeared before me, I could immediately recognize him. If I had to describe it accurately, it was probably my subconscious fear I was afraid of mistaking him again, afraid I would never find him again. So I said, "I won't mistake you a second time." Dylan misunderstood, thinking I meant I mistook Julian the first time I saw him. So he didn't pay much attention, just smiled. Not long after, Mr. Davies, having received the news, rushed over. He didn't say much, just patted my shoulder with red eyes, comforting me softly. "Let's go, Mrs. Davies is waiting at home." Using Mrs. Davies for Chinese letter, Dylan didn't follow. Just as Mr. Davies was leading me away, Dylan suddenly asked me, "You trust me that much?" The boy's face still wore that flamboyant, unrestrained smile, but somehow I sensed the carefulness hidden deep beneath it. So I thought for a moment and gave my answer. "I'm a wooden block, remember. You know, wooden people are the least flexible, they just stubbornly stick to one principle." Dylan slowly let the smile fade from his face. Finally, he sighed and cursed softly. "You really are a strange, stubborn mule." 25. My relationship with Dylan seemed to have grown much closer. He didn't run off as often anymore, but was dragged by the ear by Mr. Davies to start relearning high school material. As the older brother, you should set a good example for your sister. Dylan's initial refusal died on his lips when he saw me staring at him. He touched his nose, then looked up with a long sigh. "Fine." Because of the incident, no high school would accept Dylan, so he could only study at Mr. Davies' house. Charlie was right. Dylan's academic strengths were severely skewed. Even after studying on his own for just a short period, he could still score near perfect on the math section of standardized tests. But his humanities scores were a complete mess. It infuriated Mr. Davies, the language teacher, so much that he grabbed a stick, ready to beat Dylan, roaring, "I think you're doing this just to piss me off." At times like these, Dylan would become exceptionally obedient. He dropped the playful attitude, lowered his head, and listened seriously to the lecture. The tall boy, over 6 feet, would shrink down guiltily before the small, elderly teacher, not daring to move. Yet this same person would dare to secretly wink at me when Mr. Davies wasn't looking, clearly adopting an "I heard you, but I won't change" attitude. Even this shameless, "dead pig fears no boiling water" look is exactly like Dylan's. I recalled Mr. Davies slamming the table and yelling at me that day, and couldn't help but purse my lips into a smile. The Dylan standing before me now was vivid and alive. A far cry from the cold lines of text on paper from my past life, so I always felt I needed to do more. 26. I went to see the family of the girl in the vegetative state. The West family covered all the medical expenses, and Dylan would also visit the girl. But the family firmly believed Dylan was responsible for their daughter's accident, so they would always curse and drive him away whenever he came. Yet Dylan continued to visit periodically, silently leaving things behind before departing, even though the things he brought were always thrown out. So when they heard I came because of Dylan, the initially gentle smiles on their faces instantly changed. "I didn't come to persuade you to forgive him." After being pushed out, I quickly reached out to stop them from closing the door. The door slammed on my hand with a soft thud, and my palm immediately turned red and swollen. Oblivious to the pain, I pleaded, almost begging, "Just give me a few minutes, please." The family looked at my hand and finally fell silent, so I told them a story. A story about Dylan, told from my perspective, from Mr. Davies, and from the group of punks Dylan looked after. I took out a voice recorder. The boys had bought it after learning I was going to visit the family, pooling their saved money to buy the most expensive one they could find. They said only the best was worthy of their brother Yi. But in reality, it was because they had so much they wanted to say. It was filled with their recorded words. "I don't have parents. My grandma raised me by collecting trash. Before I met Brother Yi, I never knew people were supposed to eat 3 meals a day." The speaker was Leo Fatty Bell. Using Leo Bell for Chinese letter, no one could imagine that before meeting Dylan. He was so thin he was practically skin and bones. My parents divorced, neither wanted me, so I became a petty thief. I stole mostly from Brother Yi, but he didn't call the police. Instead, he beat me up and forced me to copy socialist core values. Steal once, get beaten once, copy 100 times, that was Charlie. As he spoke, he started painfully reciting the socialist core values again, before being pushed away in disgust by the others. Me too, my family has many younger siblings. No money for me to go to school. Brother Yi paid for my tuition. Brother Yi also paid for my grandma's hospital bills when she was sick. Sentence after sentence, all expressing their gratitude towards Dylan. The family listened silently to everything, without saying a word. Finally, the mother couldn't hold back anymore and covered her face, sobbing. The girl's father silently held his wife, telling me with red-rimmed eyes. Actually, we always knew. A truly guilty person wouldn't feel remorse, especially when the law can't convict him. But Dylan persisted in coming for 4 years. Even the worst time, when I beat him until he was covered in bruises, he didn't say a word and still came back next time. We actually knew. Towards the end, the father also choked up. But we didn't have any other choice. Really no other choice. They were just an ordinary family, with no money to support their daughter's exorbitant medical expenses, so they could only resort to this clumsy method of blaming the West family. I was speechless. I knew very well how desperate poverty could make people, especially when life and death were involved. So I opened my mouth, but couldn't bring myself to utter any words of reproach. "We'll go clarify things," the girl's mother said, wiping her tears. "But our testimony won't carry much weight. Even if the parents stepped forward to speak for Dylan, it wouldn't really clear his name. Instead, it might make others believe the girl's parents had been bought off by the West family." I know. I tried to compose myself, forcing a smile at them. Only when Rosie wakes up can his innocence be proven. Using Rosie Miller for Chinese letter, we don't know if Rosie will ever wake up in this lifetime. At this, Rosie's mother broke down, crying again. "She will wake up." My gaze fell on the girl in the hospital bed, my tone firm. "She definitely will." Now it was the parents' turn to be speechless. As they saw me off, the father couldn't help asking, "You trust him that much?" Back then, even his own parents didn't believe he didn't do it. Saying trust isn't entirely accurate. I thought for a moment, then looked at the sunlight outside the window, remembering how Dylan always instinctively walked in the shadows the first time we met. I smiled. I just want Dylan to be able to walk openly in the sunlight. The father was unable to speak. Finally, his gaze passed over me and landed on something behind me. It was Dylan. 27, I didn't know how long Dylan had been standing there, or how much he had heard. He just walked over nonchalantly, pressed my head down slightly towards Rosie's parents, and apologized. "Sorry this girl bothered you." "No, it's all right." Then Dylan put down the things he brought and silently took me to see a doctor. He had immediately noticed the hand I tried to hide. I should have just pretended not to see it. Let your hand become useless so you couldn't take the final exams. Dylan sneered, showering me with cold sarcasm. I lowered my head, feeling guilty and not daring to speak. Even the doctor eventually felt sorry for me and tried to intervene, only to receive Dylan's indiscriminate verbal attacks. After leaving the hospital, Dylan remained silent all the way. Finally, I couldn't bear it anymore. "Charlie and the others said you went out today. You think those rascals can hide anything from me?" Dylan tilted his head to look at me, amused. I know what kind of fart they're about to let out just by looking at their asses, so I stopped talking. "Nothing else you want to say to me?" "Yes," I thought for a moment, then said it anyway. "They also believe you didn't do it." But unexpectedly, Dylan's face showed no trace of surprise. He just nodded calmly. "I know." "You know? Only by hating me do they have a reason to keep going," Dylan smiled. "Besides, I don't lose anything." How could he not lose anything? He couldn't go to school because of this, had to endure strange looks and insults from so many people. How could that be considered no loss at all? I was so agitated, I almost blurted out nonsensically. People talk about saints. Well, you're the ultimate martyr. You're right. Dylan even nodded in agreement. If I weren't such a saint, I wouldn't have picked up this whole bunch of annoying little brats. I couldn't win an argument against Dylan. So, fuming, I could only shut my mouth, glaring at Dylan with red eyes. Why are you crying? Only when a warm wetness touched my cheek did I realize I had burst into tears at some point. Dylan sighed, pulling out a small pack of tissues from his pocket, the floral-scented kind. You're crying like a little stray cat. Didn't you say carrying tissues was girly? I snatched the tissues from his hand, unable to resist retorting. Yeah, Dylan instantly cheered up. Aren't I basically being both a father and a mother to you guys? When it came to shamelessness, I was no match for Dylan. Seeing he had genuinely angered me, Dylan started coaxing me softly again. He was always one to bend when necessary. But then he asked another question. Do you really believe she will wake up? She definitely will wake up, my tone was certain. Dylan paused, then after a long moment, cursed laughingly. Stubborn girl. All right, if she really wakes up, then you, my little wooden block, will be my lucky charm. But, he sighed, a small smile appearing, thank you all. 28 after returning that day, I embellished the story and told Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies immediately took off his belt and gave Dylan a beating. But before he finished, he started crying himself. So Dylan stopped dodging, letting Mr. Davies hit him while comforting the older man softly, even though he was the one who was wronged and should have been comforted. Mr. Davies realized this too. So he threw down the belt, turned around without a word, and went with Mrs. Davies to cook a sumptuous lunch. And I, the tattletale, made a face at Dylan when he glared at me. Dylan pretended to scowl and made a slitting throat gesture, but quickly broke into a smile. Only upon seeing his smile did I suddenly realize how much I had changed the adjectives, vivid and alive, now applied to me too. In my past life, all I received were evaluations like numb and calm lunatic. But this seemed pretty good too, I told myself, then couldn't help but reveal a secret smile. 29, everything seemed to be moving in a good direction. So good that I almost forgot Dylan died in his 17th year in the previous life. And I still didn't know why Dylan died. The West family had sealed off all information. I wanted to ask Julian, but died in that kidnapping. So, after being startled awake by a nightmare, I became like a frightened bird. I seemed to revert to my past self stubbornly and calmly mad. I went to find Julian. I tried to get details about Dylan's death in the past life from Julian, hoping to avoid it. But Julian refused to tell me, even when I knelt and begged him. In front of me, he seemed to transform back into the aloof Mr. West from before, his tone mocking. What, you want to protect my brother the same way you protected me last time? Chloe, forget about it. Perhaps stimulated by my kneeling, Julian's expression became somewhat crazed. He crouched down close to me, smiling as he told me, by the way, do you know why my health improved later in the last life? It's because the heart beating in my chest was my brother's. I abruptly looked up, instinctively grabbing Julian's collar. But he pried my fingers off one by one. Then he told me again, word by word. A monster like you who doesn't understand love at all. Everything you do just feels like a burden and causes pain, Chloe. Why did you have to escape? Wouldn't it have been better if you just rotted away in that family? Julian, Dylan's furious roar interrupted Julian. I was momentarily dazed. By the time I reacted, Dylan and Julian were already fighting. Julian didn't fight back. He just glanced at me whenever he had a chance, his face wearing the familiar mocking smile. This magnified the panic in my heart infinitely. So when Dylan pulled me away, I was completely dazed. Don't listen to that stinky kid's nonsense, Dylan said, also having a headache. He's been mentally unstable lately, often talking nonsense at home, don't take it to heart. I kept my head down, still lost in thought. Then I heard Dylan let out an almost inaudible sigh. He released my hand, took 2 steps forward, then turned around and opened his arms towards me. "Wanna cry in your male mommy's embrace?" His tone was teasing. But this time, I couldn't even muster the energy to be angry with Dylan. Instead, I hugged Dylan desperately, tightly, so tight I could feel myself trembling violently. "What are you afraid of?" He patted my back like comforting a child. "You're already grown up, yet you still cry at the drop of a hat." "Dylan, Dylan." I repeated his name over and over, as if only that could give me the strength to continue speaking. Finally, choking back tears, I cried out, "I don't want you to die. Pa, 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 of course I won't die." Dylan pretended to spit in disgust several times. His chin rested on top of my head, so I couldn't see the softness in his eyes at that moment. I could only hear him say, "Of course I won't die." After all, I still have to accompany this future top scorer next to me on TV. And tell the whole country that this year's top scorer is a crybaby. 30, but Dylan still broke his promise. He almost died saving those people. Dylan saved a total of 3 drowning girls, but the last girl kicked Dylan hard several times while struggling frantically. Dylan couldn't make it back up. When I rushed there after hearing the news, I stared blankly at the calm surface of the river, my hands and feet turning cold. "He touched me," the rescued girl was crying. "He kept touching me inappropriately, that's why I kicked him away." "That's not how you save someone," everyone was comforting the girl. Someone who knew Dylan even said, "I knew he wasn't that kind-hearted after all. He's done this kind of thing before." A nameless fury surged into my head, but I forcefully suppressed it. Because now wasn't the time to get angry. I looked at the water, unable to control the memory of drowning in my past life flooding back. I was scared to the point of trembling, but I still rushed forward without hesitation. Because Dylan was there, I had to find Dylan, but Julian stopped me. He held me tightly, his voice trembling. "You can't swim. Going in there is suicide. I've already sent people to rescue my brother. Don't worry, he'll be fine." I couldn't hear anything he said, only acting like a wild animal, scratching and biting Julian. But Julian clenched his teeth and grunted, refusing to let go of me. Until Dylan was pulled out, given emergency CPR, and rushed away in an ambulance. Julian still didn't let go. I collapsed onto the ground as if all my strength had left me, feeling suffocated. Only when I heard someone say, "A scumbag like him should just die," did I stiffly turn my head. I calmly stood up and walked towards that person, step by step. When Dylan was around, he would confiscate any sharp objects I carried. But ever since that nightmare, I had secretly hidden another one from him. So when the surrounding people saw me pull out a knife, terrified screams erupted. But I couldn't hear anything, couldn't see anything. My vision turned blood red. I always knew a complete lunatic hid inside me. Only Dylan could put shackles on me, locking away any path for that lunatic to emerge. But Dylan wasn't here. Dylan's alive. Julian's roar cut through the chaos, clearly reaching my ears. He clutched his heart, his face contorted in pain, but forced himself to walk towards me step by step. "Dylan won't die. But if something happens to you, have you thought about how sad Dylan would be when he wakes up? Do you think you're the only one who wants to save him? I want to too. Or are you just a complete coward you don't even dare to face Dylan again?" Julian looked at me in anguish, the veins on his neck bulging. I stared blankly as Julian walked towards me, then took the knife from my hand. "I'll take you to see Dylan." He was trembling too, perhaps even more than me. "I'll take you to see him." 31 Dylan was saved. But because he was underwater for too long, he fell into a prolonged coma. The only good news was that Dylan's will to live was very strong. The Dylan from the last life had no will to live. Julian was silent for a long while before telling me this in a hoarse voice. He said that a long time ago, a highly respected monastery abbot had predicted Dylan's fate, saying he would face a life-threatening trial. If he survived it, he would live a long and peaceful life. But Dylan had always been lively, causing trouble, rarely even getting sick. He, on the other hand, had been frail since childhood. So the West family barely paid any attention to the prediction until Dylan died. Died with absolutely no will to live. It was Dylan who sought death. "I couldn't stop it," Julian cried and laughed simultaneously. "I stopped it once, but I didn't expect there would be a next time. If Dylan really wants to die, no one can stop him." I listened numbly, devoid of any emotional reaction. Julian said many other things, probably about the past life. But without Dylan, I couldn't take any of it in. I don't want Dylan to die, and I don't want you to die either. As he was leaving, Julian suddenly said this. He looked at me, his face twisting into a smile uglier than crying. But I didn't expect that even after I said all that, you still insisted on staying by Dylan's side. So Chloe, hate me. I still didn't answer him. 32 Dylan slept for a long time. I stayed with him in the hospital for over a week. Finally, Mr. Davies couldn't stand it anymore and dragged me out of the hospital forcefully, his heart heavy. You think good grades mean you can do whatever you want? His eyes were still red, yet he lectured me fiercely. Don't want to be the top scorer anymore? Dylan is still waiting to be interviewed on TV with you. I looked at Mr. Davies blankly, not knowing what to say. Perhaps my appearance was too pitiful because Mr. Davies softened slightly. He repeatedly made me promise not to fall behind in my studies before finally agreeing to let me see OME Chinese letter accompany Dylan at night. While Dylan slept, many other things happened. For instance, Rosie woke up. The day after she regained consciousness, her parents reported it to the police, and the still weak Rosie insisted on testifying to Dylan's innocence. Also, the girl Dylan saved that day, who ended up falsely accusing him of molestation, was sued by the West family. Julian produced a voice recorder, and everyone could clearly hear the girl's unrestrained laughter. Serves Dylan right for rejecting my confession besides. He has a record. Isn't it normal for him to grope me while saving me? Plus, it's not like I wanted to kick him. Anyone would react instinctively in that situation even if Dylan really dies. It has nothing to do with me. Don't blame me. Suddenly, Dylan transformed from scumbag and mud into the great hero on everyone's lips. More and more people came to visit Dylan in the hospital. Sometimes I couldn't even squeeze through the crowd. Finally, the West family took Dylan abroad for treatment. Actually, the West family had contacted foreign brain specialists long ago. It was Julian who pleaded for you, asking them to bring the experts here from abroad. But some equipment isn't available domestically, so Dylan needs to be transferred abroad for treatment as soon as possible. Mr. Davies patted my shoulder, comforting me. Study hard, maybe Dylan will see you on TV someday. I quietly looked at the empty hospital bed and nodded. The fact that Dylan could survive was already very, very good. 33 Everything seemed to return to normal. I went to school, came home, and worked part-time. Charlie and the others sometimes came to find me, pretending to ask fiercely if anyone was bullying me so they could beat them up for me. Whenever this happened, Mr. Davies would grab their ears and give them a good lecture. They would obediently admit their mistakes but repeat them next time. No one mentioned Dylan, as if he had never existed. Until the next summer, when I was in 11th grade. I arrived at the classroom early, only to find a familiar figure sitting in my seat. I stared at the back, frozen in place. A few early classmates in the room were whispering, "Hey, isn't that Julian West from North High?" No way, my friend from North High said they saw Julian early this morning and was in a great mood. Doesn't Julian have a twin brother? His name is Dylan, I called out breathlessly. Dylan turned around, his face bearing the mischievous grin I knew so well it hurt. "Haven't seen you in a while. Little wooden block has grown so pretty," he teased, rubbing his chin as if contemplating seriously. "It's really strange. Turns out wooden blocks really can bloom beautiful flowers." I couldn't speak, my vision blurring. Through the blur, I watched Dylan walk towards me, step by step. Just like in that alley years ago, he walked towards me, silhouetted against the light. Then he reached out his hand to me. The smile on his face was as bright and flamboyant as ever. He said, "Little wooden block, I came to see you."